To what extent was that dominion given to us? Because I just revealed in this passage that God was not just speaking to Adam. He was speaking to the seed, the offspring of Adam that were going to come after Adam. So God told man, and he said to man, you are going to have dominion, you and your seeds. And that dominion has a geography, has an expanse. Let's check the expanse of man's dominion. The first thing that was captured in verse 26 of Genesis chapter 1 was that after man was meant to have dominion, man was meant to have dominion over the fish, man was meant to have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth. Oh, glory to God. Our dominion is not just limited to this sphere called the earth. We are meant to have dominion over the fish of the sea. We are meant to have dominion over the cattle of the earth. We are meant to have dominion over all the earth. Not some part of the earth, but over all the earth. This was the design of God. This was the plan of God. That man will have dominion. Man will have dominion over the earth and everything that lives in the earth. Everything in creation is subject to the authority of man. Man is the apex and the crowning of God's governance and rulership on earth. So when the animals and the sea and the wind sees man, what they see is God, because man is the representation, the image of God that all creation sees. So when the tree heard the voice of Jesus, the fig tree heard the voice of Jesus, that fig tree withered at the words of Jesus. Why? Because Jesus operated in his dominion. So when Jesus spoke, what the tree saw and what the tree heard was the voice of God. That same voice that brought the tree out of the ground from its inception in the book of Genesis. So when man comes before animals, those animals see God. That was the design of God in the beginning. But you see, along the line, the divine plan of God was jeopardized, was affected. Man was not designed to be a pilgrim on earth. According to Genesis, man was designed to be the custodian and the steward of the earth. Man was not designed in the beginning to be a passerby on the earth. No. God made the earth, created the earth solely for man to be the extension of his governance, to be the extension of his politics, to be the extension of his sovereignty. That was God's original plan. The earth was not supposed to be a temporal abode of man. No, God was sitting in his circles in the heavens, and he brought forth a being in his image and likeness to cover the earth with his influence in his stead. That was the plan of God. And we saw in the book of Genesis that God made the woman out of the man, and after the woman came out of the man, the woman was meant to be the seed carrier and the one that will host the seed of man and multiply that seed in bringing forth the offspring of man. Because God told man in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, he said, let us make man an image and likeness, that there, not that he, that there, talking about plural, about his future, about his offspring in the future. So God had to bring forth the woman. The woman was designed for partnership. That partnership was the dominion partnership, because God wanted not just Adam to have dominion over the earth, but he wanted his seeds, and for his seeds to emerge. God didn't want to go through the route of making man the way he made the first man. God never wanted to go through the route of making the first man the way he's going to make the previous men that will come from man. So God had to create the woman, and when he made the woman was meant to be the seed carrier that will multiply the seeds of man, in order for man to fulfill the mandate of God, which is the dominion mandate, to have oversight, to have superintendency over the earth in conjunction with God. So the woman was brought into light, that she might synergize with the man. This was the design. that by this synergy, the earth will be indeed given to man to have dominion in the stead of God. And we saw in the book of Genesis that God told Adam and Eve not to eat of a fruit of a tree in the Garden of Eden. Eden was the geography where man dwelt in the beginning. Man was not made in the heaven or in the celestial realm. No, man was made from the dust of the earth. If you read the verse 27 of Genesis 1, you now see how God formed man. He breathed into the nostrils of man. Before he breathed into the nostrils of man, the Bible said he made clay. He took dust from the earth and formed man. Then he breathed into man the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Man became a living being, and man began to live in Eden. And God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep and made the woman. First thing God did was that he saw that it was not good for man to be alone. So the woman was brought into view for companionship and for partnership. And when the woman came, we saw how the devil came into the Garden of Eden and told the woman deceitfully to eat of the tree that God had commanded them not to eat of. And the moment the woman conceded to that counsel that came from the devil, and she lured Adam to eat of that very tree, the Bible said their eyes were open. What happened there was that their civilization was thwarted. Their original default mode was interrupted. They were meant to be operating westward, but when the disobedience came, they began to go eastward. And the moment that occurred, the Bible said that they realized that they were naked. And when God came in the cool of the evening to fellowship with man, man was no more there where God do meet with him to converse and to have intimacy and communion with him. Oh, Remena Kala, Stephen I. And so when this occurred, the Bible now began to reveal to us that God asked Adam if he had ate of that tree. And Adam said, the woman you gave to me made me to eat of that tree. And the Bible said God had to curse the woman. And after God cursed the woman, God cursed the earth. Why? Because man was supposed to be a superintendent over the earth. Man was supposed to have dominion over the earth. So when God cursed the earth, God was saying, I am stripping you of your authority, of your dominion over the earth. The earth was supposed to see you as God. But because of this disobedience, the earth will no longer answer or be answerable to you. Your authority has been waned, will be waned. Your authority will no longer be as potent as it was. The cattle of the earth were meant to be answerable to you. The birds of the air were supposed to be answerable to you. The celestial beings in the air were supposed to be answerable to you. As long as the earth is concerned, the earth was given to man and his seeds to have dominion. But when disobedience occurred in Eden, man was stripped of his authority. And the moment man was stripped of his authority, creation began to rebel against man. And how God did this was that he caused the earth. When God caused the earth, he took the earth out of alignment. And because the earth went into misalignment, the creation and the creatures in the earth or on the earth began to rebel against man. And suddenly the sun began to be an instrument of sickness to man. The rain became an instrument of sickness to man. We began to see plants that became toxic to the body of man. In the beginning it wasn't so, but there was a corruption. So let's get this. Man was not designed to live in heaven. Man was meant to be the carrier of heaven on earth. Heaven, we'll talk about heaven, we're talking about the civilization of God, where God's rulership is supreme, where God sits and controls the affairs of the celestial beings. And we saw that God sent his seed in his image and likeness in the form of man on the earth, that man might be a carrier, an embassy, a mobile embassy of heaven on earth. The earth was meant to be a prototype of heaven because of the presence of man. What makes heaven heaven is not the design. What makes heaven heaven is the presence of God. Oh, I feel the power of God right now. What makes eternity eternity is the presence of the eternal king. Take the king out of that sphere, we will no longer have eternity. What makes heaven heaven is the presence of God, the throne of God. So man was supposed to be heaven on earth, an earthly body that carries the civilization, the economy of heaven on earth. Oh, melakatomena. And that was why God will come to fellowship with man. God will leave his eternal abode to come down to this sphere in Eden to fellowship with man. That was God's plan, that there will be a heavenly traffic from the heavens down to the earth, that the earth will come under the government of God because of the intercourse and relationship between man and God. So when God came on that fateful day in the Garden of Eden, he could not find man. Man was hiding because man disobeyed him. And that was how the union and the proximity between man and God was broken and separated. At the moment the union was broken, dominion was taken, the earth was cursed, and creation began to rebel against man. Why? Intimacy was broken. What sustains man's purpose, man's potency, is alignment with the standard of God. What sustains our dominion is our proximity and intimacy with God. The moment disobedience and rebellion comes in, covenant and agreement gets broken. The covenant God came into with man was the covenant was the covenant of dominion. As long as you stay in Eden and you do not eat of this particular tree, you will exercise dominion over all creation. All creation will be subject to you. I hope you know that God was the one that told man to name the animals and the trees of the earth. God made the animals, but he never named them. It was given to man to name the animals. Why? Because man was a co-God. Man was a God on earth. Man was not a fugitive. Man was not a pilgrim rather. Man was not on a pilgrimage. Man was on a dominion assignment. Just the way the Great Britain colonized Nigeria. They were our colonial masters. They brought their civilizations. They brought their culture. They influenced our African tradition. So what God wanted to do in the book of Genesis was to instill his culture, his government on earth through man. And so he made all creation to be subject to man, because man was the only being that had his image and likeness. Man was the only being that could reason like God, that could function in the stead of God. So God bequeathed and imparted man with dominion and authority and with wisdom. Man was given wisdom from God to reason like God. Oh, lege debrina. Shela momo koba mama shela moba. Shela baba nekoda. So we saw that when Adam disobeyed God in Eden, Adam was driven out of Eden alongside Eve. And we saw that God cursed the earth. God said to man, you will no longer reap of the earth without sweat, but from today henceforth you will sweat before the earth will produce its yields. And God cursed the woman, and God began to tell the woman, you will no longer give birth with ease. With groanings and pain you will bring forth your child. With groanings and pain you will carry your child for 9 months. Your child for 9 months. And with labor you shall give birth. The woman was not designed to give birth in labor. The woman was designed to give birth with ease. The earth was not meant to be hostile against man. Man was not designed to hustle. Man was designed to command, to decree, and it comes to be. Man was meant to decree over the earth, and the earth will bring forth its yields. That was God's original plan. So we saw that when God cursed the earth against man, and God cursed the woman, the first man with the first woman, I'm talking about Adam and Eve. When I talk about the first man, I'm being generic. Adam and Eve were driven from Eden, and we now saw how God had to send the person of Jesus to reconcile man back to his dominion seat. Because when man disobeyed God in Eden, the scepter of dominion that was given to man was stripped off from man. The devil stole that scepter through disobedience. You see, what happens is that when a man goes anti the counsel of God, what happens is that that man is stripped of his possibilities and his right. You see, disobedience does not affect God. It affects your stand with God. What disobedience does is that it strips you and makes you to be vulnerable to creatures that are supposed to be subject to you. So the devil stripped man of his scepter. And when the devil stripped man of his scepter, the devil was now called the prince of the earth. Oh, Melakai. You see, each time a man disobeys God's standard, what happens is that there is a transference of scepter, a transference of access, a transference of authority. There is an exchange. The moment a man goes anti the standard, the ordinance of God, what happens is that that man sells his right. So Adam sold his right because of disobedience. And that was how the devil now became the prince of this earth. And the devil began to perpetrate evil. The devil began to bring forth civilizations that were anti-God, because the scepter of dominion over creation that was given to man was taken away from man because of disobedience. And so what we now began to see was the rulership of the devil on earth. The devil began to exert strange philosophies, ideologies to the seeds of men. The same seed of man that was meant to have dominion, captured in the book of Genesis chapter 26. That same seed now began to rebel against God because of the rulership of the devil. So we now saw that God had to sit down with his council of elders in the celestial realm, in the eternal realm. And God now said, we need to rescue man. Because the fall did not just affect man, it affected the earth. And after it affected the earth, the devil now became